Shalom, my name is Adam, and I welcome you to the parable of the Vineyard. Every day, Yahuah is waking up a remnant, a group of people who are coming out of deceptions, realizing our walk is to consist of faith and obedience to His righteous commands. Each week, we read through and examine a portion of the Torah, allowing the Spirit of the Most High to guide, teach, and open our eyes and ears to the wondrous matters out of His law. Join us as we seek to be refined by His Word, preparing ourselves for the return of our King of Kings, being faithful and obedient, walking in His way, truth, and life. And Shabbat Shalom, and welcome back, brothers and sisters, to the Parable of the Vineyard Torah portions. This is week 3, Lech Lecha. We'll be going over Genesis chapters 12 through 17, and this is all about the call of Abraham out of his home country to go where Yahuah has sent him, which is, of course, ultimately Canaan, and, of course, the story as we know it. So this is a very, very interesting Torah portion and a lot to go over. I know I say that every time, but I got to tell you, before we get started, I haven't been this pumped up about this Torah portion cycle. I haven't been this pumped up in so long, and I have to tell you why. It's something that I just hadn't really studied out in depth before, which was the adding in the Targums. This year, I really felt like the Father was like Masoretic, which we'll be reading from the CEPHER, of course, the Septuagint, which we kind of did last year, and also this year, not only the Dead Sea Scrolls, just checking the Dead Sea Scrolls version as well, or the manuscripts, but the Targums this year. And I kind of stayed away from the Targums because I really didn't know a whole bunch about them. Even growing up in Judaism, I really never heard of the Targums, as funny as that was. Or it's not funny, but you know what I mean, as interesting as that is. But I guess I always kind of just understood them, thought them to be like just rabbinic commentary and whatnot. But it's not that at all. It's an Aramaic translation of the scriptures, and it's the oldest that we have. It's older than the Septuagint. It's at least 200 years older than the Septuagint. And I gotta tell you, I'm only through halfway through Exodus right now, but going through Genesis and going through Exodus halfway, and reading the Psalms and Isaiah and the Targums, brothers and sisters, this is a treasure hunt, and I'm really excited to share some of those findings with you this Torah portion cycle. So anyways, with that being said, I just want to let you know I'm pumped up in just an amazing way for His Word. This feels like 2015 all over again, which was the year really coming to the Father through biblical cosmology, and well, of course, learning about the amazing ways of coming back to His Torah. So anyways, with that being said, let's pray and ask Him to bless this, and let's move on to the study, because as always, we've got a lot to cover. So Heavenly Father, Most High, we just come before You in Yahusha's name, and we just thank You for, quite frankly, the desire to follow You, the desire to know You. And we know that we're not to glory in anything, but to glory in that this fact that we know and understand You and Your Word. And this is just more precious than anything that we can attain on this earth. So we thank You for that. And we just pray You continuously work and cultivate our heart, that we bring forth the right fruit that You so desire, and that You strengthen us, that we would never dare go to the left or the right hand of Your way, of your narrow path. We love You, we bless You, and we pray that You open our eyes and ears to hearing the wondrous matters out of Your Torah. In Yahusha's name, we pray in all these things. Amen and hallelujah. So let's get right into it, and we're gonna do a screen share. And actually, what we're gonna be doing, if just in case you missed the first couple weeks, we are doing the Word audio project, which is a dramatized version of reading the scriptures based off of the CEPHER. I will warn you that these chapters are still in their kind of rough cut phase. There's no sound effects; it's just kind of the background music with the reading, and we're working on getting that finalized. So it's a massive undertaking, but we're very excited to do it. So if you hear me reading but you don't see my lips moving, it's because it's a pre-recorded reading of this audio. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll kind of go back and fill in some of the gaps. So actually, excuse me, I forgot to mention, before we get started, we're actually going to read the book of Jasher, chapter 11, verse 1 through chapter 12, verse 44. And this is a story that was completely taken out of the Septuagint and the Masoretic, but is included in Jasher and is actually confirmed in the Targums. This is one of the most amazing stories of Abraham that you may have never, ever heard. And this kind of fits the gap right before he's called out of the Ur of the Chaldees, which we're going to start with in Genesis chapter 12 tonight. But so before we do that, let's fill in this whole of the story that you may have never heard about Abraham. And again, this is book of Jasher, or Yashar, chapter 11. And Nimrod, son of Cush, was still in the land of Shinar, and he reigned over it and dwelt there, and he built cities in the land of Shinar. And these are the names of the 4 cities which he built, and he called their names after the occurrences that happened to them in the building of the tower. He called the first Babel, saying, because Yahuah there confounded the language of the whole earth, and the name of the second he called Erech, because from there Elohim dispersed them. And the third he called Eched, saying there was a great battle at that place. And the fourth he called Kalna, because his princes and mighty men were consumed there, and they vexed Yahuah, and they rebelled and transgressed against him. And when Nimrod had built these cities in the land of Shinar, he placed them in the remainder of his people, his princes, and his mighty men that were left in his kingdom. And Nimrod dwelt in Babel, and there he renewed his reign over the rest of his subjects. And he reigned securely, and the subjects and princes of Nimrod called his name Amraphel, which we'll actually see in Genesis 14. One of the kings is called Amraphel, but little do we know that the Masoretic hid the fact that Amraphel is Nimrod, saying that at the tower his princes and men fell through his means. Notwithstanding this, Nimrod did not return to Yahuah, and he continued in wickedness and teaching wickedness to the sons of men. And Mardon, his son, was worse than his father, and continued to add to the abominations of his father. And he caused the sons of men to sin. Therefore it is said, from the wicked goeth forth wickedness. At that time there was war between the families of the children of Ham, as they were dwelling in the cities which they had built. And Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, went away from the families of the children of Ham, and he fought with them, and he subdued them. And he went to the 5 cities of the plain, and he fought against them, and he subdued them, and they were under his control. And they served him 12 years, and they gave him a yearly tax. At that time died Nahor, son of Serug, in the 49th year of the life of Avram, son of Terach. And in the 50th year of the life of Abram, son of Terach, Abram came forth from the house of Noah, and went to his father's house. And Abram knew Yahuah, and he went in his ways and instructions, and Yahuah his Elohim was with him. So it's really interesting that Noah and Shem kind of had this kind of school training up in the ways of Yahuah. And so Abraham attended there, and we learn from a different portion later on in Jasher that Isaac went and studied there, and so did Jacob as well. And Terah, his father, was in those days still captain of the host of the king of Nimrod, and he followed strange Elohim. And Abram came to his father's house and saw 12 gods standing in their temples. And the anger of Abram was kindled when he saw these images in his father's house. And Abram said, as Yahuah liveth, these images shall not remain in my father's house. So shall Yahuah who created me to do unto me, if in 3 days' time I do not break them all. And Abram went from them, and his anger burned within him. And Abram hastened and went from the chamber to his father's outer court, and he found his father sitting in the court, and all his servants with him. And Abram came and sat before him. And Abram asked his father, saying, Father, tell me, where is Elohim, who created heaven and earth, and all the sons of men upon earth? And who created you and me? And Terah answered his son Abram and said, Behold, those who created us are all with us in the house. And Abram said to his father, My lord, show them to me, I pray. And Terah brought Abram into the chamber of the inner court. And Abram saw, and behold, the whole room was full of gods of wood and stone, 12 great images, and others less than they without number. And Terah said to his son, Behold, these are they which made all you see upon the earth, and which created me and you and all mankind. And Terah bowed down to his gods, and he then went away from them, and Abram his son went away with him. And when Abram had gone from them, he went to his mother and sat before her. And he said to his mother, Behold, my father has shown me those who made heaven and earth and all the sons of men. Now therefore hasten and fetch a kid from the flock, and make it of savory meat, that I may bring it to my father's gods, as an offering for them to eat. Perhaps I may thereby become acceptable to them. And his mother did so, and she fetched a kid, and made savory meat thereof, and brought it to Abram. And Abram took the savory meat from his mother, and brought it before his father's gods. And he drew nigh to them, that they might eat. And Terah his father did not know of it. And Abram saw on that day, when he was sitting amongst them, that they had no voice, no hearing, no motion, and not one of them could stretch forth his hand to eat. And Abram mocked them, and said, Surely the savory meat that I prepared has not pleased them, or perhaps it was too little for them, and for that reason they would not eat. Therefore tomorrow I will prepare fresh savory meat, better and more plentiful than this, in order that I may see the result. And it was on the next day that Abram directed his mother concerning the savory meat, and his mother arose and fetched 3 fine kids from the flock, and she made of them some excellent savory meat, such as her son was fond of. And she gave it to her son Abram, and Terah his father did not know of it. And Abram took the savory meat from his mother, and brought it before his father's gods into the chamber. And he came nigh unto them, that they might eat. And he placed it before them. And Abram sat before them all day, thinking, Perhaps they might eat. And Abram viewed them, and behold, they had neither voice nor hearing, nor did one of them stretch forth his hand to the meat to eat. And in the evening of that day in the house, Abram was clothed with the spirit of Elohim. And he called out and said, Woe unto my father in this wicked generation, whose hearts are inclined to vanity, who serve these idols of wood and stone, which neither can eat, smell, hear, nor speak, who have mouths without speech, eyes without sight, ears without hearing, hands without feeling, and legs which cannot move. Like them are those that made them and that trust in them. And when Abram saw all these things, his anger was kindled against his father, and he hastened and took a hatchet in his hand, and came unto the chamber of the gods, and he broke all his father's gods. And when he had done breaking these images, he placed the hatchet in the hand of the great God which was there before them, and he went out. And Terah his father came home, for he had heard at the door the sound of the striking of the hatchet. So Terah came into the house to know what this is all about. I just realized I wasn't screen sharing. Sorry. And Terah, having heard the noise of the hatchet in the room of images, ran to the room to the images, and he met Abram going out. And Terah entered the room and found all the idols fallen down and broken, and the hatchet in the hand of the largest, which was not broken. And the savory meat which Abram his son had made was still before them. And when Terah saw when Terah saw this, his anger was greatly kindled, and he hastened and went from the room to Abram. And he found Abram his son still sitting in the house, and he said to him, What is this work which you have done to my gods? And Abram answered Terah his father and said, Not so, my lord, for I have brought savory meat before them. And when I came nigh to them with the meat, that they might eat, they all at once stretched forth their hands to eat before the great one had put forth his hand to eat. And the large one saw their works that they did before him, and his anger was violently kindled against them. And he went and took the hatchet that was in the house, and came to them and broke them all. And behold, the hatchet is yet in the hand, as thou seest. So Abraham was saying that the biggest God chopped down all the other gods because they tried to eat that food first, and so obviously he's being silly. And Terah's anger was kindled against his son Abram when he spoke this. And Terah said to Abram his son in anger, What is this tale that you have told? Thou speakest lies to me. Is there in these gods spirit, soul, or power to do all that you have told me? Are they not wood and stone? And have I not made them myself? And canst you speak such lies, saying that the large God was with them, smote them? It is you that did place the hatchet in the hands, and then sayest he smote them all. And Abram answered his father and said to him, And how canst you then serve these idols in whom there is no power to do anything? Can these idols in which do truest deliver you? Which you trustest deliver you? Can they hear thy prayers when thou callest upon them? Can they deliver thee from the hands of thy enemies? Or will they fight thy battles for thee against thy enemies? That thou shouldst serve wood and stone, which neither can speak nor hear? And now surely it is not good for thee, nor for the sons of men that are connected with you, to do these things. Are you so silly, so foolish, or so short of understanding, that you will serve wood and stone and do after this manner? And forget Yahuah Elohim, who made heaven and earth, and who created you in the earth, and thereby bring a great evil upon your souls in this matter by serving stone and wood? Did not our fathers in days of old sin in this matter, and Yahuah Elohim of the universe brought the waters of the flood upon them and destroyed the whole earth? And how can you continue to do this and serve gods of wood and stone, who cannot hear or speak or deliver you from oppression, thereby bring you down the anger of Elohim of the universe upon you? Now therefore, my father, refrain from this, and bring not evil upon thy soul and the souls of thy household. And Abram hastened and sprang forth from before his father, and took the hatchet from his father's largest idol, with which Abram broke it, and ran away. And Terah, seeing all that Abram had done, hastened to go from his house, and he went to the king, and he came before Nimrod, and stood before him, and he bowed down to the king, and the king said, What do you want? And he said, I beseech you, my lord, hear me. Now 50 years back a child was born to me, and thus has he done to my gods, and thus has he spoken. And now therefore, my lord and king, send for him, that he may come before you, and judge him according to the law, that we may be delivered from his evil. Which, by the way, I don't remember, I think we read this last week, but long story short, the birth of Abraham was marked by an astronomical alignment that all of Nimrod's advisors saw, and they said that, hey, this amazing alignment can mean nothing other than Abraham, who was born today. He's going to destroy your kingdom, and so on and so forth. So Nimrod commanded Terah to give Abraham to him so he can kill him and destroy the prophecy. And Terah ended up switching Abraham and gave Nimrod one of his homeborn servant's children, and Abraham lived. And so the matter was hidden from Nimrod. So now Terah is coming before him, and he's like basically telling him, like, sorry. And the king sent 3 men of his servants, and they went and brought Abram before the king. And Nimrod and all his princes and servants were that day sitting before him. And Terah sat also before them. And the king said to Abram, What is this that you have done to thy father and to his gods? And Abram answered the king in the words that he spoke to his father, and said, The large God that was with them in the house did to them what you have heard. The king said to Abram, Had they power to speak and eat and do as you have said? And Abram answered the king, saying, And if there be no power in them, why dost thou serve them, and cause the sons of men to err through thy follies? Dost thou imagine that they can deliver you, or anything small or great, that you should serve them? And why wilt thou not sense the Elohim of the whole universe, who created you, and in whose power it is to kill and keep alive? O fool! And remember, this is Abraham talking to Nimrod. O foolish, simple, and ignorant king, woe unto you forever. I thought you would teach thy servants the upright way, but you have not done this, but hast filled the whole earth with thy sins and the sins of thy people who have followed your ways. Dost thou not know, or hast thou not heard, that this evil which thou doest, our ancestors sinned therein in the days of old, and the great eternal Elohim brought the waters of the flood upon them and destroyed them all, and also destroyed the whole earth on their account? And wilt thou and thy people rise up now and do like unto this work, in order to bring down the anger of Yahuah Elohim of the universe, and to bring evil upon you and the whole earth? Now therefore put away this evil deed which thou doest, and serve the Elohim of the universe, as thy soul is in his hands, and then it will be well with you. And if thy wicked heart will not hearken to my words, to cause thee to forsake thy evil ways, and to serve the eternal Elohim, then wilt thou die in shame in the latter days, you and your people, and all who are connected with you, hearing thy words or walking in thy evil ways. And when Abram had ceased speaking before the king and all the princes, Abram lifted up his eyes to the heavens, and he said, Yahuah seeth all the wicked, and he will judge them. Chapter 12. And when the king heard the words of Avram, he ordered him to be put into prison. And Avram was in prison 10 days, was 10 days in prison. At the end of those days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and the sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Avram was still in the house of confinement. The king said to the princes and sages, "Have you heard what Avram, the son of Terah, has done to his father? Thus has he done to him, and I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus has he spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he stir in my presence. And behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you have heard." And they all answered the king, saying, "The man who revileth the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said, and having despised our gods, he must therefore be burned to death, for this is the law in this manner. If it pleaseth the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both night and day in thy brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it." And the king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for thee 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace, that is, in Kasdim. And the king ordered them to take Abram from prison, and to bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, lords, governors, and judges, and all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. And all the women and little ones crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was doing with Abram, and they all stood together at a distance, and there was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, "Our sovereign lord, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars," this is what I was telling you about earlier, "which we declared to the king now 50 years since. And behold, now his father has also transgressed thy commands, and mocked thee by bringing thee another child, which thou didst kill." And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth, and he ordered Torah to be brought before him. And the king said, "Hast thou heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how didst thou? And if thou shalt speak truth, thou shalt be acquitted." And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Torah said to my king, "My lord and king, thou hast heard the truth, and what the sages have said spoken is right." And the king said, "How couldst thou do this thing, to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that thou didst not beget, and take value for him?" And Terah answered the king, "Because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time, and I took a son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king." And the king said, "Who advised you to do this? Tell me. Do not hide aught from me, and then you shall not die." And Terah was greatly terrified in the king's presence, and he said to the king, "It was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to this." And Haran was in those days that Abram was born 32 years old, but Haran did not advise his father to do anything. For Terah said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Terah, "Haran thy son, who advised thee to this, shall die through the fire with Abram, for the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desire in doing this." And by the way, the canon backs up that Haran died in Ur of the Chaldees. Or we don't know that yet. I'm sorry. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the ways of Abram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, "Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will follow and go after the king." So his heart was double-minded. And when Terah had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and all the women and little ones were there standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords. And the servants of the king lifted them up and cast them both into the furnace. And Yahuah loved Abram, and he had compassion over him. And Yahuah came down and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords with which they bound him were burned, while Abram remained and walked about in the fire. So the story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, this happened to Abraham first. Just like Nebuchadnezzar, right, when they were tossed into the fire because they didn't bow down to the statue. Well, Abram was tossed into the fire because he broke down the images, right? And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with Yahuah. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flames of the fire spread over them, and they were burned, and 12 men of them died. And Avram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights, and all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire. And they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Avram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord with which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter. And they went and saw it and told the king. And the king rose to go and see it. And he saw Abram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire. And he saw Haran's body burned. And the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Abram to be taken out of the fire. And his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about, and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from it. And the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste and bring Abram out of the fire, that you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Abram out. And the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. And when the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Abram, O servant of Elohim who is in heaven, go forth from the midst of the fire and come hither before me. And Abram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire and came and stood before the king. Wow. And when Abram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abram coming before the king with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Abram, How is it that thou wast not burned in the fire? And Abram said to the king, The Elohim of heaven and earth, in whom I trust, and who has all that in his power, he delivered me from the fire into which thou didst cast me. And Haran, the brother of Abram, was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Kasdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Abram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Abram. And Abram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the Elohim of the world who made you, and serve him, and go in his ways. For it is he who delivered me from out of this fire, and it is he who created the souls and the spirit of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world, and it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. Hallelujah. Wow. And this thing seemed wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Abram was saved from the fire, and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Abram many presents, and he gave him his 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of the one was Onai, and the name of the other was Eliezer. And that became the head of Abram's house, right? And all the kings and princes and servants gave Abram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl, and the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Abram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him. About 300 men joined him. And Abram returned on that day and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abram served Yahuah, his Elohim, all the days of his life. And he walked in his ways and followed his Torah, his law. And from that day forward, Abram inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve Yahuah. In that time, Nahor and Abram took unto themselves wives, the daughters of their brother Haran. The wife of Nahor was Milcah. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and Sarai, wife of Abram, was barren, and she had no offspring in those days. So that is just, honestly, it's one of the best. It's just one of the most amazing stories in Scripture. And why it was cut out of the Masoretic and Septuagint, no idea, but it is in the Targums, which is really, really interesting. But, last week we were talking about how I'd always wondered how Abraham was able to marry his sister and it not be against Torah, because we've seen that the Torah was certainly alive well before Mount Sinai. And thanks to Jasher and the Targums, we find out that Sarah was actually his niece. And I had one more scenario that kind of bothered me, which was according to the Masoretic, Amram, the son of Levi, son of Kohath, son of Levi, married Jochebed, which the way it makes it sound in the Masoretic is that he married his aunt, which is also against the Torah. But we actually learned from the Targums that she was actually his cousin, because we get tripped up by when it says her father was so and so. Well, that could be grandfather, and we don't know it. So, anyways, really really interesting stuff. So let's now get to and actually let me I want to show you the Targums here. Second to last paragraph. I want to read this for you. This is the Targums. And this is Genesis 11 in the Targums. These are the generations of Terah. Terah begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran begot Lot. And it was when Nimrod had cast Abram into the furnace of fire because he would not worship his idol, and the fire had no power to burn him, that Haran's heart became doubtful, saying, if Nimrod overcome, I will be on his side, but if Abram overcome, I will be on his side. And when all the people who were there saw that the fire had no power over Abram, they said in their hearts, is not Haran the brother of Abram full of divinations and charms? And has he not uttered spells over the fire that it should not burn his brother? Immediately there fell a fire from the high heavens and consumed him, and Haran died in the sight of Terah his father, where he was burned in the land of his nativity in the furnace of the fire which the Kasdi had made for Abram his brother. So a little different retelling of it, but essentially the same story. You've got Abraham being cast in the fire, and him not being touched, and his brother Haran dying. Okay, so let's now go to chapter 12, and we will do again the reading from the word audio, which all right, here we go.
Bereshit, Genesis chapter 12. Now Yahuah had said unto Avram, get you out of your country and from your kindred and from your father's house unto a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you, and curse him that curses you. And in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So Avram departed as Yahuah had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Avram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Avram took Sarai his woman, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. And Avram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, unto the high oak in the plain of Moreh. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And Yahuah appeared unto Avram and said, unto your seed will I give this land. And there built he an altar unto Yahuah, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Beit El, and pitched his tent, having Beit El on the west, and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar unto Yahuah, and called upon the name of Yahuah. And Avram journeyed, going on still towards the Negev. And there was a famine in the land, and Avram went down into Mitzrayim to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he had come near to enter into Mitzrayim, that he said unto Sarai his woman, behold now, I know that you are a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Mitzrayim shall see you, that they shall say, this is his woman, and they will kill me, but they will save you alive. Say, I pray you, you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and my soul shall live because of you. And it came to pass, that when Avram was come into Mitzrayim, the Mitzrayim beheld the woman that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Avram well for her sake. And he had sheep, and oxen, and he-asses, and men-servants, and maid-servants, and she-asses, and camels. And Yahuah plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues, because of Sarai, Avram's woman. And Pharaoh called Avram and said, what is this that you have done unto me? Why did you not tell me she was your woman? Why said you, she is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to be my woman? Now therefore, behold, your woman, take her and go your way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his woman, and all that he had.
Okay, so chapter 12. It's always a question that I have is, would we be willing to leave everything we have at the drop of a dime, or whatever that saying is? Would you be willing to leave everything you have in an instant if Elohim was like, go, right? And actually, a lot of you are kind of doing that. A lot of you have been kind of heeding the call to leave the coasts, leave the big cities, and find something a little deeper in the heartland of this country, seeing what's coming on this country. But more so, I always wonder what it's going to be like that day when he comes and gathers us. I've been recently thinking that it might be something like when the two angels came to Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're like, "Let's go. We need to go now. You've got just a minute. Grab what you can and let's go. Don't turn back. Remember Lot's wife," like Yahusha says in Luke, the book of Luke. So, with everything that's going on, and because I really do believe that those that believe in Messiah, keep his commandments, will be the wise virgin, the ready bride. And I really believe that he takes those people out of harm's way. It's going to be a very small people. I mean, it's going to be a drop in the bucket compared to the 2 billion professing Christians on this earth. It's going to be just a drop in the bucket. But I do believe that is available for people that hearken or hear his voice in these last days. So if that's the case, how's it going to happen? Is he going to be like, let's go, or I don't know. But all I know is that we need to think about this and be willing to just leave everything when Yahuah says so. So, and I know most of you wouldn't be like, oh no, I'm not going to go with, I'm just going to stay here and hate. Now, I know none of you would do that, but it's I guess comforting to think that day might happen in our lifetime. But anyways, one interesting little tidbit about this. So this, we kind of just read through this and just move on. But here's Egypt, and here is, his people kind of being oppressed because his wife gets taken from him, and here you got Egypt with bunches of plagues. There's a passage in Jasher chapter 67 where it's actually Balaam, of all people, who is a counselor to Pharaoh. He actually, this is hundreds of years later, retells this story. Actually, excuse me, it's not, it's Jethro actually retells the story. This is Jasher chapter 67, we'll start at verse 16. And this is a dream that Pharaoh had, and he was just freaking out about it. And Pharaoh rose up early in the morning, and he called all his servants and related to them the dream, and the men were greatly afraid. Excuse me. And the king said to all his wise men, I interpret, I pray you, the dream which I had dreamed, that I may know it. And Balaam, the son of Beor, answered the king and said to him, this means nothing else but a great evil that will spring up against Egypt in the last days. For a son will be born to Israel who will destroy all Egypt and its inhabitants, and will bring forth the Israelites from Egypt with a mighty hand. Now therefore, O king, take counsel upon this matter, that you may destroy the hope of the children of Israel and their expectation before this evil arise against Egypt. And the king said unto Balaam, and what shall we do thus unto Israel? Surely after a certain manner we did at first counsel against them, and could not prevail over them. Now therefore give you also advice against them, by which we may prevail over them. And which, by the way, Balaam is the one that gave Pharaoh the evil counsel to enslave the Israelites. And Balaam answered the king, saying, send now and call thy 2 counselors, and we will see what their advice is upon this matter, and afterward they will speak. And the king sent and called his 2 counselors, Reuel the Midianite and Job the Uzite. Yes, this is Job. And they came and sat before the king. And the king said to them, behold, you have both heard the dream which I have dreamed, and the interpretation thereof. Now therefore give counsel, and know, and see what is to be done to the children of Israel, whereby we may prevail over them, before their evil shall spring up against us. And Reuel the Midianite answered the king and said, this is Jethro, may the king live forever. If it seem good to the king, let him desist from the Hebrews and leave them, and let him not stretch forth his hand against them. For these are they whom Yahuah chose in days of old, and took as the lot of his inheritance from amongst all the nations of the earth and the kings of the earth. And who is there that stretcheth his hand against them with impunity, of whom their Elohim was not avenged? Surely thou knowest that when Abraham went down to Egypt, Pharaoh, the former king of Egypt, saw Sarah his wife, and took her for a wife, because Abraham said, "She is my sister," for he was afraid lest the men of Egypt should slay him on account of his wife. And when the king of Egypt had taken Sarah, then Elohim smote him and his household with heavy plagues, until he restored unto Abraham his wife Sarah, and then he was healed. And so anyways, and he also retells the same thing that happens to Abimelech. So this story is so major that it's told, this is what, probably hundreds of, maybe 100, 150 years later. So this is a major, major event. So just something to take into consideration. All right, so let's move on to chapter 13. Give me a second. And here we go.
Bereshit, Genesis chapter 13. And Avram went up out of Mitzrayim, he and his woman and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. And Avram was very rich in cattle, in silver and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the Negev even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first, and there Avram called on the name of Yahuah. And Lot also, which went with Avram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Avram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Avram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray you, between me and you, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself, I pray you, from me. If you will take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the circle of the Yarden, that it was well watered everywhere, before Yahuah destroyed Sodom and Amorah, even as the garden of Yahuah, like the land of Mitzrayim, as you come unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the circle of the Yarden, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Avram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the circle of the Yarden, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before Yahuah exceedingly. And Yahuah said unto Avram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up your eyes, and look from the place where you are, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, to you will I give it, and to your seed forever. And I will make your seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall your seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto you. Then Avram removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto Yahuah.
Okay, short little chapter, but interesting nonetheless. I will say it's, there's so many parallels in the Torah as to like things that repeat in types and shadows and patterns. And when it says right here, and Avram went up out of Mitzrayim, he and his woman and all he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Well, really the word that's used there, wilderness, and actually in the Septuagint it actually reads wilderness. It says into the wilderness, and it just makes me think of what's to come with the Israelites, with Moses, kind of like our spiritual wilderness journey now. Messiah Yahusha in the wilderness being tempted. Just so many different parallels there. And then verse 2, it says, And Abraham was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. Again, here's another parallel. Just like the Israelites left Egypt into the wilderness, very rich. So that's what happened to Abraham as well. So Exodus 12:35-38. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moshe, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And Yahuah gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Sukkot, about 600,000 on foot, that were men besides children, and a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. So they left rich. And so it happened with Abraham, it happened with Moses and the people coming out, and quite frankly, it happened to the children leaving Babylon. Well, at least all the treasures that were stored from the temple were kind of returned to them. And there's tons of prophetic. I didn't pull them all up for today because it'd be such a big rabbit trail. But the same promise is for the final regathering, when he gathers all of his people to New Jerusalem. Well, the kings of the earth are going to bring all their riches, they're just going to bring all their riches to New Jerusalem and give it unto Yahuah and his people. So it's just amazing stuff how things kind of just repeat in patterns like that. I want to read a little snippet from verse 9 in the Targum. So verse 9, it says, "And contentions arose between the shepherd of Abram's flock and the shepherds of the flock of Lot. For the shepherds of Abram had been instructed by him not to go among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, who as yet had power in the land, and to restrain the cattle, that they should make no depredation." So basically, there was like some borders that they were supposed to keep to, and apparently Lot's cattle, his herdsmen would let him kind of go into the land of the Canaanites that was not sectioned off for them. And so, Abraham's like, I don't want to steal, I don't want that to happen, because they were running out of room, and so I guess, maybe they weren't doing it like to be, to be thieves, but nevertheless, they needed the extra space. And so that's when they're like, let's just separate. It also says here that Sodom and Gomorrah was well watered everywhere before Yahuah destroyed it, even as the garden of Yahuah, like the land of Mitzrayim. And just wanted to share a couple things here. Ezekiel, showing that Sodom, one of their sins was that they had plenty, they had overabundance, and because of that, their hearts were lifted up. Ezekiel 16, 49-50, "Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom, pride, fullness of bread," that's an overabundance, "an abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters, neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy, and they were haughty and committed abomination before me, therefore I took them away as I saw good." Also, verse 13, "But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners exceedingly before Yahuah." Here's just a small snippet. We'll be reading more of this next portion when it actually deals with Sodom and Gomorrah, but here's just a small snippet. Chapter 18 verses, book of Jasher, chapter 18 verses 11-15. "In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against Yahuah, and they provoked Yahuah with their abominations. They strengthened in aging abominably and scornfully before Yahuah, and their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before Yahuah. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about a half a day's walk, and in there were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year, with their wives and children and all belonging to them. And they rejoiced there with the timbrels and dances. And in the time of rejoicing, they would all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and his daughter in the hands of his neighbor, and they did not say a word. And they did so from morning to night, and they afterward returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times in the year." And man, I can just only imagine their thought processes of like why they would do that. I bet they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, it's for the good of the community." So we just, it's like what chaos. Like if everybody's sleeping with each other, Like, you don't know whose child is really whose, but I bet they're like, see, we're all one. And I bet those are the kind of doctrines they'd have. I can just only imagine they'd be like, oh, we just need to come together and we just need to be all one big family, and so we need to share each other, and don't withhold a thing from each other. And this is real community, right? And man, well, how disgusting. I mean, can you imagine those of you that are parents, seeing your daughter, with your, like, what, 13, 14-year-old virgin daughter, just, have your neighbor having his way with. I mean, that is just, like, beyond me. It's just disgusting. And this is just a small snippet of some of the stuff they did. Another snippet from the Targums that says, and the men of Sodom were depraved in their wealth, one with another, and they sinned in their bodies, and they sinned with open nakedness and the shedding of innocent blood, and practiced strange worship, and they rebelled greatly against the name of Yahuah. And then I also want to read Jasher, a little snippet in Jasher 13, verses 1 through 4. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot, and the son of Haran, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son Abram, and all the souls of his household, and went with them from Ur-Kasdim to go into the land of Canaan. And when they came as far as the land of Haran, they remained there, for it was exceedingly good land for pasture, and of sufficient extent for those who accompanied them. The people of the land Haran saw that Abram was good and upright with Elohim and men, and that Yahuah his Elohim was with him. And some of the people of the land of Haran came and joined Abram. And he taught them the instruction of Yahuah and his ways. And these men remained with Abram in his house, and they adhered to him. And Abram remained in the land 3 years, and at the expiration of 3 years, Yahuah appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Yahuah, who brought you forth from Ur the Kasdim, and delivered thee from the hands of all thine enemies. So, like, what enemies are these? Of course, this is Nimrod and all of his schemes. And now, therefore, if thou wilt hearken to my voice, and keep my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah, then I will cause thine enemies to fall before you, and I will multiply your seed like the stars of heaven, and I will send my blessing upon all the works of thy hands, and thou shalt lack nothing. And that promise is still alive for his seed, even unto this day. And then 13:15, it says, for all the land which you see, to you will I give it, and to your seed forever. And this is one of the biggest reasons why, this and chapter 15, which we'll see in a bit, this is the land of inheritance, to where it says that his seed will remain forever. That's why I truly believe that is where New Jerusalem will rest upon, which is basically what we call the Levant area, which I'll show you a picture here in a sec. But let's get to chapter 14. And this is probably one of my favorite background songs for the reading.
Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 14. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elakar, Kedor Laomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and with Birsha, king of Amorah, Shinav, king of Admah, and Shem-Eber, king of Tseboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the valley of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Kedor Laomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Kedor Laomer, and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Chem, and the Emim in Shaveh Kiryathaim, and the Chorim in their Mount Seir, unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Amorah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Avram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and all his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Avram the LBRY, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Emori, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Avram. And when Avram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hova, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him at the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's valley. And Malki-Tzedek, king of Shalem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of El Elyon. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Avram of El Elyon, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be El Elyon, which has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto El Avram, Give me the persons and take the goods to yourself. And Avram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up my hand unto El Yahuah, El Elyon, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Avram rich, save only that which the young man have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre, let them take their portion.
Okay, so this is the other great part about playing these recordings is we get to see any errors. And so I also commission any of you out there that hear these recordings and follow along. If we make any mistakes, let us know. This is going to be a great opportunity to clean up some things. So somehow a big chunk got cut out, and I'm not sure why, but this is a good opportunity to fix it. So real quick, it missed this. And then when they returned, they came to Ein Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekim, and also the Amorim that dwelt in Chatzon Tamar. And there went out king of Sodom, and the king of Amorah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the valley of Siddim, with Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, which we saw is Nimrod, and Arioch, king of Elakar, 4 kings with 5. And the valley of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Amorah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. So somehow that all got cut out. So I apologize, but again, this is a good way for us to kind of see what we need to edit and fix. This is all just rough stuff, but it is interesting that this is like just a major battle. You got 4 kingdoms versus 5 kingdoms, and Kedorlaomer and his kings, they're going around and killing all the giants and people that rebel. It's just, this is like this is some of the stuff that we've seen in Hollywood, like these major battles. I can imagine this is where they get some of this material from, and maybe the thought processes of these major battles that happen throughout the ages. So just absolutely amazing. So verse 16, and he brought back all the goods, and also brought against him his brother Lot and his goods, and is with him. It's amazing. I think one of the texts say that the Abraham and his 318 men, they went up against like 800,000 people and destroyed all their armies. Like, how does that happen other than the power of Yahuah in doing a miracle? How does David beat Goliath? How did Levi and Shechem go into a town and kill maybe upwards of 10,000 people, just them two and 2 swords? Of course, Yahuah was with them. So it's absolutely amazing to imagine that we serve this very same creator that gives power unto men. Verse 18, it says, and Malki-Tzedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of El Elyon. It so happens that this Melchizedek is actually named, and it is Shem, which it's actually confirmed by the Targums, and I'll show you. We're going to read Joshua 16, 1 through 12. And that time Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, sent out all the neighboring kings to Nimrod, king of Shinar. So it says it tells you right there that's who Amraphel is, who is then under his power, and to Tidal, king of the Goyim, or nations, and to Arioch, king of Elasar, with whom he made a covenant, saying, Come up to me and assist me, that we may smite all the towns of Sodom and its inhabitants, for they have rebelled against me these 13 years. And these 4 kings went up with all their camps, about 800,000 men, as they were there, and smote every man they found in the road. And the 5 kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, Shinab king of Admah, Shemeber king of Zeboim, and Bera king of Sodom, Bersha king of Gomorrah, and Bela king of Zoar, went out to meet them, and they all joined together in the valley of Siddim. And these 9 kings made war in the valley of Siddim, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were smitten before the kings of Elam. And the valley of Siddim was full of lime pits, and the kings of Elam pursued the kings of Sodom. And the kings of Sodom with their camps fled and fell into the lime pits, and all that remained went to the mountain for safety. And the 5 kings of Elam came after them and pursued them to the gates of Sodom. And they took all that was in Sodom, all that were there in Sodom. And they plundered all the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they also took Lot, Abram's brother, and his property, and they seized all the goods of the cities of Sodom. And they went away, and Eunuch, Abram's servant, who was in the battle, saw this, and told Abram all that the kings had done to the cities of Sodom, and that Lot was taken captive by them. And Abram heard this, and he rose up with about 318 men that were with him, and he that night pursued these kings and smote them, and they all fell before Abram and his men, and there was none remaining but the 4 kings who fled, and they went each his own road. And Abram, that's 800,000 men. And Abram recovered all the property of Sodom, and he also recovered Lot and all his property, his wives and little ones, and all belonging to him, so that Lot lacked nothing. And when he returned from smiting these kings, he and his men passed in the valley of Siddim, where the kings had made war together. And Bera, king of Sodom, and the rest of his men that were with him, went out from the lime pits into which they had fallen to meet Abram and his men. And Adonizedek, or Melchizedek, Adonai is Lord, or you can even just, it's the same person. This is Melchizedek. And Adonizedek, Melchizedek, king of Jerusalem, the same was Shem, went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech. And Adonizedek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him 1/10 from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies, for Adonizedek was a priest before Elohim. And just to show you that Shem was kind of still around also, book of Jasher chapter 9 verses 5 through 6. This is what I was telling you about earlier. When Abram came out from the cave, he went to Noah and his son Shem, and he remained with them to learn the instruction of Yahuah and his ways, and no man knew where Abram was. And Abram served Noah and Shem his son for a long time. And Abram was in Noah's house 39 years. And Abram knew Yahuah from 3 years old, and he went in the ways of Yahuah until the day of his death, as Noah and his son Shem had taught him. And all the sons of the earth in those days greatly transgressed against Yahuah, and they rebelled against him, and they served other gods, and they forgot the Yahuah who had created them in the earth. And the inhabitants of the earth made unto themselves at that time every man his god, gods of wood and stone, which could neither speak, hear, nor deliver. And the sons of men served them as they became their gods. All right, so a couple of things I want to talk about in 14. So here's a little passage in the Targums, chapter 14. And it was in the days of Amraphel, he is Nimrod, who commanded Abram to be cast into the furnace. He was then king of Pontus, Arioch, so called because he was Arik, tall among the giants, king of Tasalar. And Malchizedek, who was Shem bar Noah, so Shem, son of Noah, the king of Yerushalayim, came forth to meet Abram, and brought forth to him bread and wine, and in that time he ministered before Elohai. Yeah. So, one last passage, Jubilees 17, chapter 17, verse 15 through 18. We'll read this real quickly. And the prince Mastema came, which is Satan, came before Elohim. Behold, Avraham loves Yitzchak his son, and he delights in him above all things else. Bid him to offer him as a burnt offering on the altar, and you will see if he will do as this command, and you will know if he is faithful in everything wherein you do try him. Right? This is the key word, trying him, to test Abraham. And Yahuah knew that Avraham was faithful in all his afflictions, for he had tried him through his country, right? Leave your country, and the famine, going down into Egypt, and had tried him in the wealth of the kings. And that's what we saw at the end of chapter 14, where Abraham's like, I'm not going to take even a shoe latchet from you, lest you should say, I have made Avram rich. So it was a testing to see if Abraham would take the riches. And he had tried him again through his woman when she was torn from him, and with circumcision, and tried him through Ishmael and Hagar, his maidservant, when he sent them away. So it was 10 tests that Abraham passed, all 10. So praise be to Yah for that. So let's go to chapter 15.
Bereshit, Genesis chapter 15. After these things, the word of Yahuah came unto Avram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Avram, I am your shield, and your exceeding great reward. And Avram said, Adonai Yahuah, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the steward of my house is this Eliezer of Damascus? And Avram said, Behold, to me have you given no seed, and lo, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of Yahuah came unto him, saying, This shall not be your heir, but he that shall come forth out of your own generation shall be your heir. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now towards the heavens, and count the stars, if you be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall your seed be. And he believed in Yahuah, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am Yahuah, that brought you out of Ur of the Kasdim, to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, Adonai Yahuah, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said unto him, Take me a heifer of 3 years old, and a she-goat of 3 years old, and a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took unto him all these, and divided them in the midst, and laid each piece one against another. But the birds divided he not. And when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Avram drove them away. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Avram, and lo, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Avram, Know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward they shall come out with great substance. And you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorim is not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. And the same day Yahuah cut a covenant with Avram, saying, Unto your seed have I given this land, from the river of Mitzrayim unto the great river, the river Perath, the Kenaim, the Kenizim, the Kadmonim, and the Chittim, and the Perizim, and the Rephaim, and the Amorim, and the Kenanim, and the Girgashim, and the Yebusim.
Man, what a good chapter. I want to share this with you. Some of you may be familiar with this, but you know, when Yahuah says, look up to the stars and see if you can number them, so shall your seed be. There's quite a bit more to that than meets the eye. And there's a video I would love for you to test. It's called Enoch 43, Identity of the Stars in Heaven Revealed. And we actually start off with, this verse in Genesis 15. And your current thoughts on what the stars are may be challenged, but it may also be quite the blessing to kind of take a look at. So it's called, again, Enoch 43, Identity of the Stars. So you can just type in probably like Enoch 43, Parable of the Vineyard, or Enoch 43, Identity of the Stars, or something like that. So anyways, check that out when you have some time. It may bless you. Be careful. It may bless you. Verse 6, it says, And he believed in Yahuah, and it was counted to him for righteousness. And praise Yah for that. And you know, unfortunately, I think modern day Christianity has taken that and ran with it in unfortunately in the wrong way, because they also forget Genesis 26:5, which says, Because that Abraham obeyed my voice, which is clear enough. To obey his voice means to keep his commandments. Very clear in Exodus 19. That's what it means. And kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So faith and obedience is what Abraham had. And if we want to be the seed of Abraham, as Yahusha says, you know, he says, as he said to the Pharisees, you know, if you were Abraham's seed, you would do the deeds of Abraham. And this is what Abraham did. So praise Yah for that. Verse 8, it says, or actually not verse 8. Let's see, where is it? It's not verse 8. Where is it? No, maybe not. But we were speaking earlier about the land of inheritance, the promised land. This is what's called the Levant, essentially. It's maybe even not here, but this is the borders that were that Abraham was given, and this is what I believe is roughly where New Jerusalem is going to sit. And it's right about the same. It's very close in size for that to work. So pretty interesting. And let's see. Let's read a little portion in the Targums. This is chapter 15. Is that right? Let's see. Let's scroll down. Sorry. 15. So at the beginning of chapter 15, it's a little confusing. It says, after these things, the word, which by the way, it says the word of Yahuah came unto Avram. So this is one of the very few times that in the Torah, it says the word of Yahuah came to Avram. And those of us any of us that have read the book of John, we know that the word is Yahusha, his son. And so what you'll find is that Yahusha is all over the Old Testament. I'm here to say that when Messiah said that no man has seen the Father, I believe that to be true. And what I mean by that is everything, all glory, everything is due to the Father, but he's done so through his Son. His Son has always been the mediator on earth. I believe it was his Son that was on Mount Sinai, his Son that was walking in the garden in the cool of the day saying, Adam, where are you? He formed Adam out of the dust. All these interactions you're seeing here with Abraham, all was Messiah. And that's just kind of where I've been led. And what's been really surprising about the Targums is the Targums, almost everything says the word. The covenant is through the word. The covenant of circumcision is through his word. I mean, it's so clear. And why that was cut out of the Septuagint, the Masoretic, I have no idea. Maybe to hide the truth that it was the word from the beginning that was with man, and that the covenant was made through the Father, but through him. To the Father, but through him. So, but it says here, the word of Yahuah came unto Avram in a vision, saying, fear not, Avram, I am your shield and your exceeding reward. So why would he say fear? Because we haven't seen any fear from Avraham, except for maybe when he went into Egypt, and he's like, I don't want to die, so just say that I'm your brother. But outside of that, we don't really see any fear from him. So the Targums actually kind of give us an idea of what was going through his mind before Messiah said, fear not. After these words, this is chapter 15. After these words, when the kings had gathered together and had fallen before Abram, and 4 kings had been slain, and the 9 hosts brought back, Abram reasoned in his heart and said, woe to me, because I have received the reward of my appointments in this world, and have no portion in the world to come. Or peradventure the brethren and friends of those who have been slain will combine in legions and come against me. Or at that time there was found with me the reward of a little righteousness, so that they fell before me. But the second time reward may not be found with me, and by me the name of the heavens may be profaned. Thereupon was the word of Yahuah with Abram in a vision, saying, fear not. For if these men should gather together in legions and come against you, my word will be your shield. And also, if these fall before you in the world, the reward of thy good works shall be kept and be prepared before me in the world to come, great exceedingly. So that really explains, honestly, what he's talking about. Don't fear, I'm your shield and your exceeding great reward. So I got to tell you, these Targums are, quite frankly, a treasure hunt. I know I said that about the Septuagint. I really believe that even more so with the Targums, and I'm really excited to go over these with you all. So anyways, let's get into chapter 16. Excuse me.
Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 16. Now Sarai, Avram's woman, bore him no children, and she had a handmaid, a Mitzri, whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said unto Avram, behold now, Yahuah has restrained me from bearing. I pray you, go in unto my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her. And Avram hearkened to the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Avram's woman, took Hagar, her maid, the Mitzri, after Avraham had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. and gave her to her man Avram to be his woman. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. And Sarai said unto Avram, My wrong be upon you. I have given my maid into your bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Yahuah judge between me and you. But Avram said unto Sarai, Behold, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as it pleases you. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of Yahuah found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, whence came you, and whither will you go? And she said, I flee from the face of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of Yahuah said unto her, Return to your mistress, and submit yourself under her hands. And the angel of Yahuah said unto her, I will multiply your seed exceedingly, that it shall not be numbered for multitude. And the angel of Yahuah said unto her, Behold, you are with child, and shall bear a son, and shall call his name Ishmael, because Yahuah has heard your affliction. And he will be a wild man. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. And she called the name of Yahuah that had spoken unto her, You, see me. For she said, Have I also looked here after him that sees me? Wherefore the well was called BitChute Chapter. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Avram a son, and Avram called his son's name, which Hagar bore, Ishmael. And Avram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Avram.
Okay, so a couple things here. It's interesting. I kept highlighting the angel of Yahuah, and I don't have the verses up here, so I'm not going to waste your time searching for them. But it's funny. I was actually had a few minutes, had a little bit of spare time last night, and I saw that Rob Skiba and Zen Garcia were doing a Genesis reading, and I click on it, and sure enough, they're reading this Torah portion, and Zen was reading the Targums, and it was very clear that Hagar had associated the angel of Yahuah with the word of Yahuah. So that's confirmed an understanding that I feel like Yahuah has been leading me and many of my close brothers to understand that the angel, not an angel, but the angel of Yahuah, like the one that was in the burning bush that was speaking to Moshe, says the angel of Yahuah was in the bush burning. So Hagar connects the word of Yahuah as being the angel of Yahuah. So I gotta tell you, this is why the Targums has been such a treasure hunt, because I'm seeing Messiah now clearer and more than I've ever seen, and it's just an absolute blessing and just amazing. So let's take a look at a couple things. Let's look at the book of Jasher, chapter 16. 23 through, 16. We're going to, what was that, 23 through 33. And Sarai, the daughter of Haran, Abram's wife, was still barren in those days, and she did not bear to Abram either son or daughter. And when she saw that she bare no children, she took her handmaid Hagar, whom Pharaoh had given her, and she gave her to Abram her husband for a wife. So, this is just something that it is what it is. Avram, the progenitor of the entire seed of Abraham, had two wives. For Hagar learned all the ways of Sarai as Sarai taught her. She was not in any way deficient in following her good ways. And Sarai said to Abram, Behold, here is my handmaid Hagar. Go to her, that she may bring forth upon my knees, that I may also obtain children through her. At the end of 10 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, which is the 85th year of Abram's life, Sarai gave Hagar unto him. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarai his wife. And he took his handmaid Hagar, and Abram came to her, and she conceived. And when Hagar saw that she had conceived, she rejoiced greatly, and her mistress was despised in her eyes. And she said within herself, this can only be that I am better before Elohim than Sarai my mistress. For all the days that my mistress has been with my Lord, she did not conceive. But me, Yahuah has caused in so short time to conceive by him. And when Sarai saw that Hagar had conceived by Avram, Sarai was jealous of her handmaid. And Sarai said within herself, this is surely nothing else, that she must be better than I am. And Sarai said unto Avram, my wrong be upon you. For at the time when thou didst pray before Yahuah for children, why didst thou not pray on my account, that Yahuah should give me seed from you? And when I spake to Hagar in thy presence, she despised my words, because she has conceived, and thou wilt say nothing to her. May Yahuah judge between me and you for what you have done to me. So basically she's saying that Abraham is the wrong because Hagar disrespected her in the presence of Abraham, and Abraham didn't say anything. And Abram said to Sarai, behold, thy handmaid is in your hand. Do unto her as it may seem good in your eyes. And Sarah afflicted her, and Hagar fled from her to the wilderness. Also, we'll take a look at Jubilees 17. Let me a second here. Jubilees 17, 16 through 17. I think we already read that. Yeah, okay. Well, it's the same thing we read. And so this is talking about the 10 trials of Abraham. So one of Abraham's trial was, and he had tried him through Ishmael and Hagar, his maidservant, when he sent them away. But yeah, that's actually further down the road when Ishmael was like 13, I think. So the Targums read a couple things. But Sarah, the wife of Abram, had not borne to him, but he had a handmaid, an Egyptian, and her name was Hagar, a daughter of Pharaoh, whom he gave to him as a handmaid at the time that he received her, being struck by the word from before Yahuah. And she gave thanks before Yahuah, whose word spake to her, and thus said, thou art he who livest, art eternal, who seest, but art not seen. For she said, behold, here is revealed the glory of the Shekinah of Yahuah after a vision. So, anyways, it's just interesting that Hagar is in fact royalty. Hagar was given to Sarah as a handmaid when Abraham and Sarah went into Egypt, and Pharaoh took Sarah, and Pharaoh was struck with plagues, gave him riches and cattle, and apparently one of his daughters. So Hagar is royalty. So interesting. Very interesting. All right, last chapter. Let's go to 17, and we'll finish up this Torah portion. Give me just a second.
Bereshit, Genesis, chapter 17. And when Avram was 90 years old and 9, Yahuah appeared to Avram and said unto him, I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. And Avram fell on his face, and Elohim talked with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. Neither shall your name any more be called Avram, but your name shall be Avraham. For a father of many nations have I made you. And I will make you exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come out of you. And I will establish my covenant between me and your seed after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim unto you, and to your seed after you. And I will give unto you, and to your seed after you, the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim. And Elohim said unto Avram, You shall guard my covenant, therefore, you and your seed after you in their generations. This is my covenant which you shall guard, between me and you and your seed after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant betwixt me and you. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every male child in your generations. He that is born in your house, and he that is bought with your money must need to be circumcised. And my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. And Elohim said unto Avraham, As for Sarai your woman, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her, and give you a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. Then Avram fell upon his face and laughed, and said in his heart, Shall a child be born unto him that is 100 years old? And shall Sarah that is 90 years old bear? And Avraham said unto Elohim, Oh, that Yishmael might live before you. And Elohim said, Sarah your woman shall bear you a son indeed, and ye shall call his name Yitzchak. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him. And as for Yishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Yitzchak, which Sarah shall bear unto you at this set time in the next year. And he left off talking with him, and Elohim went up from Avraham. And Avraham took Yishmael his son, and all that were born in his house, and all that were bought with his money, every male among the men of Avraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the selfsame day, as Elohim had said unto him. And Avraham was 90 years old and 9 when he circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the selfsame day was Avraham circumcised, and Ishmael his son. And all the men of his house born in the house and bought with money of the stranger were circumcised with him.
There it is, the big day. And you know, in here, so many times it says for everlasting generations, forever, forever, every single one. There's no ifs, ands, or buts from my understanding. But to start off in verse 1, it says, and be perfect. And this is a commandment also from Messiah Yahusha. You know, most of us grew up in a thought process or a faith, quote unquote faith. It's like, oh, we're all sinners and we're all just going to mess up. And that's just, you know, God just loves us anyways, you know. And that's why we're just saved by faith, because nobody can keep the law. Only Messiah can keep the law. Not so. He has given us now the Spirit so that we may walk in spirit and truth, which is what Yahuah commands of us, according to John chapter 4. Ye have heard that it had been said, this is Matthew, 5:43 through 48. Ye have heard that it had been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and then hate thine enemy, which, by the way, it's had said. This is not written, because there's nowhere in the Torah it says you are to hate your enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And this is hard. This goes against the grain of what your insides feel like when somebody attacks you, whether physically or even sometimes worse, mentally or spiritually, like putting you down. Especially for this walk that we're on, you know, people, you know, are saying all sorts of names because we just want to keep the commandments, and that's just so weird, so different. That ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have you? Anybody can do that, right? Do not even the publicans the same? And if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans do so? Be therefore perfect, even as our heavenly Father, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. So especially when dealing with people, we should be perfect. So when someone's like cursing you or telling you off, bless them. Say, I hear you. May Yah bless you, and have a great day. You know, or just something, and be sincere about it. Not just bless you. See ya. I mean, that's not what he's talking about, right? Verse 14, it says, and the uncircumcised male whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So I want to go over a couple things. Circumcision is truly spiritual and physical, I believe. I don't believe the spiritual has replaced the physical, but there is a spiritual part of it. Deuteronomy 10:16, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff-necked. And this is truly this is part of the walk. But for someone to say it's only the spiritual and not the physical, I think is wrong. That goes along the same lines as saying, when Messiah said, "You have heard that it has been said of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, if a man has lusted after a woman in his heart, he has committed adultery in his heart already." So same thing with you have heard it has said, "You shall." Thou shalt not kill, but I say unto you, he who hates his brother in his heart has committed murder already in his heart. So for us to say that the spiritual replaces the physical is to say, I can go next door to my neighbor's house and commit adultery with his wife as long as I don't lust after her in my heart. It doesn't make any sense. It's both. You don't go physically commit adultery, and you don't mentally or in your heart commit adultery. Same thing as hate. It's not just not literally going out and murdering somebody, but it's also not hating your brother without a cause. It's both. And that's how I liken also circumcision. It's not only the physical, but it's the spiritual as well. And this is where some of you are going to be upset with me. I'm not an anti-Paul guy, but I have some issues with him, and circumcision is one of them. I'm just here to say I disagree with what he writes here. 1 Corinthians 7:18-20 is any man called being circumcised, let him not become uncircumcised. Obviously, that's not possible. So maybe there's some foreshadowing here, like don't go a different way. Is any called in uncircumcision, let him not be circumcised. Now, unfortunately, this has been taken literally, in millions, if not billions, of people have gone through this walk and this faith not being circumcised because of this very verse. So you can say, oh, that's not what Paul was saying. Well, that's fine, and I might even agree with you, because again, I'm not an anti-Paul guy per se, but I have some issues with some of his words and some of the fruit they have borne, and some of the fruit that's been born of this very verse is people not getting circumcised. And I believe that if we were to have to take a side, whether it be Genesis 17 or 1 Corinthians 7, I'm taking Genesis 17's word for it. That's the Torah, because even in the Torah itself says, if anybody leads you away from the commandments, that's me testing you. And I'm not here to say that Paul is purposefully leading people astray. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe this part was added to his letters. I really don't have any idea, but I take issue with this. Circumcision is nothing. Who can say that? And uncircumcision is nothing but the keeping of the commandments of Elohim. Well, circumcision is one of the commandments of Elohim, and let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. I'm here to say that circumcision is still a commandment that has not been done away with. And I think that's a really slippery slope to say, we don't need to be circumcised anymore, and it's only the circumcision of the heart. Because again, we'd be going back to this, what we were saying earlier, where, I can go commit adultery as long as I don't have adultery in my heart, or I can go commit murder as long as I don't hate my brother in my heart. It's silly. It doesn't make any sense. And I look at circumcision the same way. You can't have the spiritual without the physical, in this case. And same thing, people spiritualize the Sabbath. Oh, Yeshua is my Sabbath every day. That's not what the text says, and that's what it's never said. And what does the Messiah say? Matthew 5:17-18. Think not that I am come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, which hasn't happened yet, of course, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the Torah till all be fulfilled. So the circumcision has not been done away with. It's something that is still here. And Deuteronomy 8:2, and thou shalt remember all the way which Yahuah the Elohim led you these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble you, to prove you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or no. And quite frankly, circumcision, just to put it bluntly, is a commandment, and I don't believe it has been done away with. I don't think it's optional. I don't think that that if you've been called in uncircumcision, to stay in uncircumcision. I just don't agree with that. And so I know you may find some of my words hard, and you may feel that I'm speaking against the word of Elohim by speaking against Paul. But we've got to ask ourselves, are we going to stand for Genesis 17 or not, which says it's every male my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. Never goes away, ever, ever. Let's take a look at Jubilees 15:24-34. 24-34 of Jubilees. And on the selfsame day was Abraham circumcised, and all the men of his house, and all those whom he had bought with money from the children of the stranger were circumcised with him. This Torah is for all the generations forever. And there is no circumcision of the days, and no omission of one day out of the 8 days, for it is an eternal ordinance. It doesn't get much clearer than that. Ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. And everyone that is born, the flesh of whose foreskin is not circumcised on the 8th day, belongs not to the children of the covenant which Yahuah made with Avraham, but to the children of destruction. Nor is there moreover any sign on him that is Yahuah's, but he is destined to be destroyed and slain from the earth, and to be rooted out of the earth, for he has broken the covenant of Yahuah Eloheinu. For all the angels of the presence and all the angels of sanctification have been so created from the day of their creation, and before the angels of the presence and the angels of sanctification he has sanctified Yisrael, that they should be with him and with his holy angels. That's interesting. And do you command the children of Yisrael, and let them observe the sign of this covenant for their generations as an eternal ordinance, and they will not be rooted out of the land. For the commandment is ordained for a covenant, that they should observe it forever among all the children of Yisrael. For Yishmael and his sons and his brothers and Esau, Yahuah did not cause to approach him, and he chose them not because they are the children of Avraham, because he knew them, but he chose Yisrael to be his people, and he sanctified it and gathered it from amongst all the children of men. For there are many nations and peoples, and all are his, and over all has he placed ruachot in authority to lead them astray from him. That's interesting, right? He says, I create the good and the evil. But over Yisrael, he did not appoint any angel or ruach. We learned about this actually at the end of the last Torah portions, that he divided the nations according to the 70 angels presiding over territories. But he said specifically there was not one that was supposed to be over Yisrael. But since we're in dispersion, of course, we're in the hands of one of these 70 angels. For he alone is their ruler, and he will guard them and require them at the hand of his angels and his ruachot, at the hand of all his powers, in order that he may guard them and bless them, that they may be his and he may be theirs from henceforth forever. And now I announce unto you that the children of Yisrael will not guard true to this ordinance, and they will not circumcise their sons according to all this Torah. For in the flesh of their circumcision they will omit the circumcision of their sons, and all of them, sons of Belial, will leave their sons uncircumcised as they were born. And there will be great wrath from Yahuah against the children of Yisrael, because they have forsaken his covenant and turned aside from his word, and provoked and blasphemed, inasmuch as they do not observe the ordinance of this Torah. For they have treated their members like the other nations, so that they may be removed and rooted out of the land, and there will no more be pardon or forgiveness unto them, so that there should be forgiveness and pardon for all their sin of this eternal error. So if you're listening to this and you're not circumcised, I would take this before Yahuah. Pray, fast, whatever you need to do, and see what he wants you to do with this, because the commandment seems to be very, very clear. Let's take a look at also the Targums. We're going to read chapter 17, and here is really where the gem of the Targums really comes out. Listen to this. And Yahuah said unto Avram, Go you from your land, and separate yourself from thy kindred. Go forth from the house of thy father. Go into the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great people, and will bless you, and magnify your name, and thou shalt be blessed. And I will bless the priest who will spread forth their hands in prayer, and bless thy sons, and Biliam, who will curse them, I will curse, and they shall slay him with the word of the sword, the mouth of the sword, and in you shall be blessed all the generations of the earth. And Abraham went according as Yahuah had spoken with him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was the son of 75 years old at his going forth from Haran. And Abraham took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all the substance which they had acquired, and the souls whom they had proselyted in Haran, and went forth to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Shechem, and unto the plain which he had been shown. And I'm skipping this. Okay. And the Canaanites were then in the land, for the time had not yet come that the sons of Israel should possess it. And Yahuah was revealed unto Abram, saying, To thy sons will I give this land. And he built there an altar before Yahuah, who was revealed to him. And he went up from thence to a mountain which was eastward of Bethel, and outspread his tent, having Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built there an altar before Yahuah, and prayed in the name of Yahuah. And Abraham, Oh, wow, I was reading the wrong one. Forgive me. I misunderstood. Yeah, here we go. Chapter 17, this is what I meant to read. And Abraham was a son of 99 years old, and Yahuah appeared to Avram and said, I am El Shaddai. Serve before me and be perfect in thy flesh. And I will set my covenant between my word and you, and will multiply you very greatly. Did you catch that? There's more. And because Abraham was not circumcised, he was not able to stand, but he bowed himself upon his face, and Yahuah spake with him, saying, Behold, I have confirmed my covenant with you, and with you shall be the father of many peoples, and thy name shall be no more called Abram, but Abraham shall be thy name, because to be the father of a great multitude of peoples have I appointed you, and I will make you exceeding fruitful, and will set thee for congregations, and kings ruling over peoples shall come forth from you. And I have established my covenant between my word and you. The covenant has always been with the Father through his Son. His Son has always been the mediator with us. I'm getting goosebumps right now. This is so amazing. This is one of the biggest finds of this year. And thy sons after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and to thy sons after you. And I will give to you and to thy sons after you the land of thy habitation, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. And I will be to them God, Elohim, and to Yahuah. And Yahuah said to Abraham, and thou shalt observe my covenant, you and your sons after you and their generations. This is my covenant that you shall observe between my word and you. Right? He's saying, my covenant is between my son and you. My son is my word and you. And your sons after you, every male of you being circumcised, though he have not a father to circumcise him, and you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin as a sign of the covenant between my word and you. Brothers and sisters, I'm telling you, it's both. It's the spiritual circumcision of your heart and the physical. And the son of 8 anyway, so it just keeps going, but it's just so amazing that this was made between his word. It was made between Yahusha pre-incarnate before he came down and sojourned with us. So, man, just absolutely amazing. And last thing I wanted to mention, that we saw Abram, his name being changed to Abraham, and Sarai to Sarah. And it's also interesting that in Revelation 2:17 that says that he gives his faithful people a new name. So, man, praise be to the Most High for all that. So that concludes our Torah portion, and let's just give thanks to the Most High for revealing his word and his truth in these last days. Heavenly Father, Yahuah, we just come before you, and we're just so grateful for your word, and we're just so thankful that you have shown us all these things in these last days, that you have given us a heart of repentance and given us a mind and a heart that wants to serve you the way that you have ordained for the sons of Israel for all generations. We just thank you for your word that you have sent from the very beginning for our covenant to be with you through him. And we're just so thankful for revealing these things in this late hour, that we may try to understand you better. And we just thank you, Abba. You are the revealer of wisdom. You are the one that is doing all this through your Ruach through us. And we just thank you so much, and that we ask you to continue to cultivate our lives and to prune off us what is bad and to keep that which is good. And we just bless you, and we just thank you, and we are earnestly waiting for you, and want to be found ready. In Yahusha's name, amen and amen. Yevarechecha Yahuah Ve'yishmerecha Ya'er Yahuah Panav Elecha V'chuneka Yisa Yahuah Panav Elecha Ve'yasem Lecha Shalom. Yahuah bless you and keep you. Yahuah make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yahuah lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. Shabbat shalom, brothers and sisters. It was great studying with you. I pray that it was a blessing for you, but more importantly, I pray that this was a sweet savor before the Most High, and we'll see you soon. Shabbat shalom. Rest well, brothers and sisters. We'll talk to you soon.
I sing to Yahuah for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea. Yah is my strength and song, and he has become my deliverance. He is my El, and I praise him, Elohim of my father, and I exalt him. Yahuah is a man of battle, Yahuah is his name. He has cast Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea, and his chosen officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. The depths covered them, they went down to the bottom like a stone. Your right hand, O Yahuah, has become great in power. Your right hand, O Yahuah, has crushed the enemy. And in the greatness of your excellence, you pulled down those who rose up against you. You sent forth your wrath, it consumed them like stubble. And with the wind of your nostrils, the waters were heaped up. The floods stood like a wall, the depths became stiff in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I pursue, I overtake, I divide the spoil, my being is satisfied on them. I draw out my sword, my hand destroys them. You blew with your wind, the sea covered them, they sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Yahuah, among the mighty ones? Who is like you, great in Kodeshah, awesome in praises, working wonders? You stretched out your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your kindness, you led the people whom you have redeemed. In your strength, you guided them to your Kodesh dwelling. Peoples heard, they trembled, anguish gripped the inhabitants of Pelasheth. Then the chiefs of Edom were troubled, the mighty men of Moab. Trembling grips them, all the inhabitants of Canaan melted. Fear and dread fell on them by the greatness of your arm. They are as silent as a stone, until your people pass over, O Yahuah. Until the people whom you have bought pass over. You bring them in and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in the place, O Yahuah, which you have made for your own dwelling, the Mikdash, O Yahuah, which your hands have prepared. Yahuah reigns forever.